What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. So I had a question that was asked of me in the comments, and I want to go over this question, and then we're going to do a video about this. This is about President Trump. So let me show you the question first, or actually it's a statement. It says, Trump is not protecting Social Security. He is destroying it. So what do you guys think about that comment? Do you think that President Trump is destroying Social Security? So that's what I want to talk about in this video. But first off, you guys can do me a favor. Please like the video. And if you're watching this video and you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to look at the first term, so President Trump's first term, as well as his second term. We're right now 2025. And so we're going to go over some of the positives and the negatives when it comes to Social Security and President Trump, his first term, and going into his second term. Okay, so let's take a look at this illustration. So Trump's first term here. So direct benefit cuts. Now, President Trump and pretty much all the presidents over the last 20 years or even longer than that, they've all said that they're not going to cut Social Security. And that's good, but we want to hear more. We want to hear, what do you want to do to reform Social Security? Because that needs to happen. But most presidents, when they come into office, they say they have no plans to cut Social Security. And so direct benefit cuts, in his first term, we didn't see any direct benefit cuts, so that was good. Now, payroll tax holiday. And this is important. I want to talk about this a little bit more because I think this kind of, flew under the radar. People weren't really paying attention to it when it happened. This was during the pandemic, so people were, the stimulus checks were going out, and we were trying to really accommodate for the fact that we had to shut everything down. And so the payroll tax holiday, they had a proposal out there. They wanted to do it for a longer period. I think they wanted to do it from April of 2020 until the end of the year, until December of 2020. They weren't able to do that. However, President Trump had an executive order that did the payroll holiday, and I'll explain what the payroll holiday is, but payroll tax holiday, they did that from September until December, so it was 4 months. And so what this payroll tax holiday is the FICA, that FICA contribution that you contribute when you're working, you're contributing 6.2%, your employer's matching that 6.2%, that money is going to the Social Security trust funds, and it helps to pay out benefits for people who are currently receiving benefits. So you can see it's very important. So when you do a payroll tax holiday, that means you suspend that 6.2%. So you're no longer contributing 6.2%, and your employer is no longer contributing that 6.2%. So that money isn't going to the Social Security Administration. So they did that for 4 months. And then after that, what they did is they had to catch up. And so during the Biden administration, they had to catch up. So the taxes were a little bit higher. Payroll taxes were a little bit higher in order to offset and pay off the 4 months where people didn't have to contribute to FICA. Now, President Trump did say that in a second term, he wanted to make the payroll tax holiday permanent. Now, just think about that. If you're going to make the payroll tax holiday permanent, that would mean you would no longer have money going to the Social Security trust funds. And we would just be taking from the trust fund, basically. So we wouldn't have there would be no more taxes when it comes to FICA, no more. And so eventually what would have to happen is they're going to have to change Social Security. And this is where the fear comes in, because if they're making a change, they could say privatize Social Security and let you invest the money on your own. And so now you're contributing whatever you think is good to contribute for your own retirement. The problem is you have no more FICA, which means that money is not going to the trust fund. And the CBO did a study back then, and they said that the trust funds would be depleted in like 2 to 3 years. And so it wouldn't take very long for the trust funds to completely be depleted if you're taking 100% from the trust funds and you're no longer bringing in money from the payroll contribution. So that would just destroy Social Security. Now, this is something that President Trump wanted to do. He actually wanted to make this permanent. And so now that we're into his second term, is this something that we're going to hear in the future? Is he going to start talking about, let's eliminate the payroll tax? And I'm telling you, if that happens, then we're going to see people really struggling, because if the trust funds are completely depleted and you have no payroll tax anymore, then guess what? Because we've been talking about this all the time, and we'd see a 23% cut if the trust funds were completely depleted, but we would still have FICA. We would still be bringing money in through FICA. But if we're not bringing money in through FICA and the trust funds run out of money, then guess what happens? no one gets paid. No one gets anything. And so that would be just horrible. So this is something that we need to keep our eye on, because President Trump did say that back in his first term. In his second term, he wanted to make that permanent. And so during his first term, they did have proposals out there to basically tighten up SSDI, so make it harder for people to qualify for disability insurance. And they had proposals, but they didn't pass. And so that could have been another potential cut that we could have seen back in his first term. And then the cost of living adjustments. So we did see cost of living adjustments during President Trump. They were pretty minimal, 1.6, I think, 1 year, 1.3 in another year. So they weren't very high. But you can look at that as a good thing, because if COLA isn't high, that means that inflation wasn't high. Now, we did see what happened with inflation in 2021, but a lot of that had to do with the pandemic, because the government, we were spending a lot of money. We were sending out stimulus checks. We were sending out PPP funding. Everybody qualified, even if you didn't have a business. They were, it was like a honor system and all of this stuff. And now they're trying to go after some of those people who received PPP funding, but there was a lot of money that was going to a lot of people, and people were spending that money, and that pushed up inflation. And then we had supply chain issues because of the pandemic. And once we opened up again, we had a shortage of products, which caused prices to go up, and they never really came back down. They came back down a little bit, but they're pretty much staying steady where they are. Okay, now let's look at President Trump in 2025. So what has transpired in 2025? Actually, a lot has transpired in 2025. So first thing, we saw Mr. Bisignano. He was appointed to be the Commissioner of Social Security, and now he's been confirmed. He was confirmed in late April, and he is now the new Social Security Commissioner. So that was one change there. Social Security Fairness Act. Now, I put this on here, but this was signed into law before President Trump became president. So January 5th is when it was signed into law. President Biden signed it into law. It was voted on back in 2024 and passed both the House and the Senate. And so this wasn't an accomplishment for President Trump. However, during his administration, that's when the payments started going out. Okay, so initially they were saying it could take up to a year for people to receive their retro payment, the retroactive payment for 1 year, and the monthly increase. But they were able to streamline it and get everything out. And now, I think they're over 90% done. So I think that's a huge accomplishment, considering initially they were talking about it would take a year, and it's only taken 3-4 months for them to actually get these checks to the American people who qualify under the Social Security Fairness Act. Okay, and then we have the migration from COBOL. So they changed their system. The old system that they were using, they moved into a new system. Now remember, we had Doge that was in there tinkering around and looking at all the information that's in Social Security, the database and all of that, and people's identity, all that stuff. Doge is in there. They're still in there right now looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, apparently, but we haven't really heard much about waste, fraud, and abuse when it comes to Social Security. But nonetheless, you have Doge still there doing that. So that has been a big change. And then here they were working on verification when it comes to identity theft. So initially what they were saying is people are going to have to go to the area offices in order to verify who they are, or they're going to have to get online and go through the steps in order to verify that way. But they were taking away the verification over the phone. And so that got a lot of people upset, because some people they're not computer savvy, especially when you have to look at the demographic, the age demographic. You're talking about older people. They might not be familiar with getting online and getting verified that way and signing up for a My Social Security account and all of that. And then also older people, they're not as mobile as younger people, so they might not be able to get to an area office. And so that's when they made that change. So initially they said, okay, we're going to get rid of the phone system, the phone verification, but then they had to back away from that, because people were calling their congresspeople saying, look, this is not going to work for me. I don't use computers. I'm not able to just go down to the area office. And so now they've gone back, and so they will allow for the phone verifications. And then increased overpayment clawback. And this is another thing. Now we've seen a lot of changes that were initially made, and then they backpedaled and they made another change. So this is another one here. When it comes to the clawbacks, It was 10%. So when President Trump came into office, they were clawing back. So basically what was going on, let's say there was overpayments. So the Social Security Administration overpaid you, and then they sent you a letter saying, look, you owe us $5,000. You're going to have to pay it back. And what the President Biden's administration was doing is they said, okay, we're going to do it at 10%. We're not going to just take their whole Social Security check, because just to give you an example here, let's say it is $5,000 that you owe. So if you owe $5,000, what they could do and what they were doing in the past is they were taking 100%. And so they would take your whole check. So let's say you get $2,000 for Social Security benefits every month. They would take that whole $2,000. And then the next month they take another $2,000. And then the next month they would take $1,000 of that $2,000. And so that's what they were doing before. President Biden changed that, said, oh, it's only going to be 10%. So now they would take $500 from you. So if you're getting $2,000, a $2,000 check, they would take $500. So you would still have some money to live on. Now, what President Trump wanted to do, or what President Trump actually did in March, in the end of March, they went back to 100% clawback. And so they kept that for a little over a month, and then they went to 50%. So now it's at 50%. Now, I do believe that they work out a payment plan with you too if you do contact them. This is a situation where, let's say they're trying to contact you and say that you owe $5,000, you didn't respond, and so then they would automatically take your whole check. But if you do respond to them, I'm sure you could work out some type of a payment plan with them. But even still, it's a situation. I think it should never be 100%. I don't even think it should be 50%. I think 10% is pretty fair. The federal government is going to be there for a long time. So it's not like you have to get your money right away, as long as you know that you're going to be receiving, because you control it. You control how much money a person can receive in Social Security benefits. So you can take that 10%. Every month you'll be able to receive that 10%. So that's just my opinion on that. And so then also we're talking about student loans. So student loan garnishments at 15%. And then denial of benefits to undocumented immigrants. Now, this is really interesting because this was an executive order that was signed. And we've seen a lot of executive orders, and some of them, they don't do anything. This is one that doesn't do anything. When it comes to Social Security, I did a video just last week. When it comes to Social Security and SSI, undocumented immigrants cannot receive Social Security benefits or SSI. And this is, you have politicians out there that they believe this, I guess, or they're spouting, they're saying this. They're saying that undocumented immigrants are receiving Social Security benefits. They're not. That is absolutely false. And it's sad that you have to see an executive order come through and it's like, okay, what is this really? You know what I want to know? I want to know, this executive order went through. How many people did it impact? 0. I can guarantee you 0. Because in order to qualify for SSI, you need to be documented here. You can't be undocumented. And then also when it comes to Social Security, and we know how Social Security works. We know that you have to earn your credits, your 40 credits, in order to qualify. You have to be 62 or older. There's certain criteria that you have to meet in order to receive Social Security benefits. So not everyone is going to qualify. And if you don't have the 40 credits, you're not going to qualify. And if you're undocumented, you can't show 40 credits because you're not on record earning anything. And if you're using someone else's Social Security number or a false Social Security number, that money isn't going to you. When you contribute your FICA, that isn't, that's not showing a record for you because you're undocumented. You don't have documentation to show that you're legally working in the U.S. And that's what you need. So, when you think about it, it wouldn't even make sense that someone would even think that you could receive Social Security benefits if you were undocumented. However, we have people that believe that. I've heard people say that time and time again. Well, we wouldn't have a problem with Social Security if we didn't have undocumented people receiving benefits. But they're not. They're not. And do your research. If you think I'm lying to you, do your research and come back to me. You can put it in the comments. Leave a link too. You can send me an email as well, david@thetecshow.com. Send me links and we'll go over it. I'll do a separate video and I will debunk the information that you provide to me because it's just not true. So that's where we are when it comes to Social Security and the impact, President Trump's impact on Social Security over the years. Now, one more thing that I want to talk about is a promise that President Trump made. President Trump made the promise that he was going to eliminate taxes for people receiving Social Security benefits. Guess what? We have this big, beautiful bill that everybody's talking about right now. And guess what? That big, beautiful bill doesn't have no tax on Social Security. It's not in there. They have a deduction, $6,000 deduction, that's really not going to benefit very many people receiving Social Security benefits. And so this promise he is not keeping. This promise would have helped a lot of people who are currently receiving Social Security benefits, as well as other pensions or other retirement plans. It would have helped them because they wouldn't have to pay taxes on their Social Security benefits. But that's not in this bill. And the reason that they're giving is, well, the Byrd rule is not going to allow us to make drastic changes to Social Security, and so we can't do it through reconciliation. Okay, well, what about the proposal? Is there a proposal out there that's talking about eliminating taxes for people receiving Social Security benefits? Not that I know of. Or actually, I'll say there is one. It's the Social Security 2100 Act, Representative Larson's plan. But guess what? They haven't taken that up, and they probably won't take that bill up. So we don't have any plan to eliminate taxes for people receiving Social Security benefits. And it doesn't seem to bother President Trump that that is not in this big, beautiful bill. And make no mistake, this big, beautiful bill is probably going to be the only large piece of legislation that they pass in the next 2 years. This is going to be it. And it's going to add to our national debt, which is another reason why you're going to have Congress people saying, this is it. This is all we're doing. We're not doing anything more. So that's all we have for this video. Make sure if you guys want to send me an email, you can do that, david@thetecshow.com. Like the video, subscribe for more, and check out these videos over here for some more great content. Talk to you later. Bye.